Yeah, let's jump into it. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Mike Rainone. I am the co-founder and vice president of product concept development, known as PCD Works. PCD, Papa Charlie Delta, WORKS. And I am co-founder because my wife, and vice president because my wife is the co-founder and is the president of the company. And we are folks who develop products for everyone from startups to big corporations.
And what is your secret to a good life?
Always look for the astounding. Look for things that make you go, oh, holy crap. I had no idea. That is what it is. And most of my life has been aimed at technology because I was a physics major at the beginning. I'm always a pretty damn good mechanical engineering person. I'm always looking for new technology to apply. And so I look for things in the technical world that make me go, well, that's amazing. People come to me now. I've been doing this for 40 years. And they come to me and say, well, we want to think about this. And I go, yeah, I know that. We've done that, or we know about it. We know where to find it. So most of the time, it's not predictable. It's very predictable that we know something about what they want to do. A couple of years ago, someone came to me and said, we want to work on auxetics. And I went, whoa, well, okay, what's that? Well, when you pull a rubber band, it gets skinnier. When you pull an auxetic, it gets bigger. It thickens. What? How can that be? Well, there's several ways to do it. You can do it. It could happen on a molecular level, but we found another way to do it, and we have invented the technology to actually do that, and are working on that now. And that was just an astounding. When he commented, I said, "You're a crackpot. You're crazy." And I've known him for years. Brilliant guy. But that was it. And so how is it that you make for a life of being astounded? Well, the number one principle is to be curious, is to always have, I don't know if you develop it or you're always that way. Mine was always there, but came into focus on a big failure. And it was in architecture school. And my position was always kind of a weird thing because I was actually on the faculty, but I was still taking graduate courses. And so, it was in the area of man or person environment relations. So I'm in a design class and I'm just stuck on making the territory right. And we miss the delight. And, Vitruvius said commodity, firmness, and delight. Well, the commodity we figured out. I focused on the commodity. It's got to work. The firmness, of course, is the building, but the delight is the part that is most important. Buildings that are boring fade into the background. Buildings that make you go, whoa, how'd they do that? Or why did they do that? Or I will remember that. That part of delight is really, really important. And after that failure, I can remember was driving in my van, and I said, I want to see something new every day, and I want to be challenged with some new concept every day of my life. And for the most part, it's been that way. I am challenged. We're working on ground penetrating radar and LiDAR detection of things and all sorts of weird stuff, and that keeps the curiosity and the mind occupied. The second most important thing is empathy, to be able to empathize with users, with your family, being able to say, I am sorry and I screwed up, or I got that wrong, is absolutely critical in my mind to a whole life. The next thing is, I will tell you that I am persistent. I never thought I would be persistent because if I didn't like a job, I'd say, God, I'm going to quit. I hate this. And I'm bored. I'm stuck in this damn architectural cubicle. I hate it. So I was not persistent. And we've got here, and I have learned persistent because I hate failure. and I will do any damn thing possible to keep from failing. And I often push too far. We've lost money on things that I give up on, but persist. And most of the time, because of that persistence, we've succeeded. And you can't do it without that precision. That in life, another thing that's really important is rigor. You have to think about the decisions you make, and you have to determine how do you add rigor to this? How do I know that I'm doing the right thing? How can I look back and see? How can I measure that? Rigor is important. And maybe the last one is I call it a poop. Give a shit attitude. It's like, that doesn't mean you have to be insensitive, but you have to be an ego confident enough to say, you know what? I'm going to keep trying this. I'm going to believe in it, and I'm going to do it. And, you just have to believe in yourself enough to keep setting foot in front of another and living your life. And not that you're insensitive, but when somebody says you can't do that, you got to ask, is it really important to do it? Is it really part of my role, my life, to actually go forward? There's sort of a story about this. I was at a innovation conference in Colorado years ago, and I was on the panel. And of course, it's an innovation conference. It's supposed to be innovative. I'm on the front panel. There are 150 people in the audience, and they're all wearing suits. I went as Jerry Garcia, and I wore a red dashiki. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had a long gray beard and a ponytail, and I went there, and I had old red sunglasses, and I sat up there with them. And the only thing I didn't have, couldn't play the guitar, and I had all my fingers. So here I am. And the argument was, is creativity born, or is that born in, or can you learn it? So I'm walking around. I just grabbed the microphone. I started walking. First thing in the morning, everybody's asleep, and I'm sticking microphones in front of everybody. And I asked a woman, I said, why are you here? And she said, my boss told me to go to Colorado and get creative. This ought to do it. One seminar ought to fix that. And then finally somebody asked me, so, what do you think? I said, you can only be creative if you've had erotic thoughts about your mother-in-law. And the table with the women, they just went, and one of the panelists, a guy named Doug Hall, fell off of his chair, and there was this laughter and appall. And it was like, you know what? I don't care. That was a spontaneous, just creative, wacky answer that I wanted to shake people to the core, because of course that's stupid. But you know what? Most of them were not asleep after that comment.
If you had a entrepreneurial team, founding team, or a group of engineers, and they were stumped and they were tired, right? The table. They've been sitting around, they've been scribbling and doing calculus all day, and they're exhausted trying to solve a problem. How would you encourage them to get creative in that moment? What are some of the things that you would do to open up their minds and wake them up?
Well, we do these brainstorming sessions here, and have done 50 of them, maybe more, over the past 25 years here. People come here, who stay here for days, and do exactly that. Come up with new ideas, and we start off by feeding them over our kitchen table. We may have 20 people at the table, but getting the ego out of the way is the most important thing we do. Because they're all, my dog's bigger than your dog, and I know that. And I stomp that out first night, drink wine. I take the bosses away, and I tell them, if you are not encouraging, if you say anything to discourage anything, what that does is it not only suppresses their willingness to bring up a crazy idea, but below that, there's wonderful evidence that actually decreases the probability of that thought ever coming into their non-conscious area to then be verbalized. So you will stifle it by that. So your job is to encourage the craziest ideas. And when we have someone that says, yeah, this is a great, crazy idea, someone says, even a comment, I said, no, I always tell them, no, no negative. Tell them how would you do it instead? How would you do that? All right. So let's go back to there. These are exhausting sessions, and you have to have many breaks. You can't do it. We've had people come here to learn how we do it, and they go back to their office buildings, and it never works. And it doesn't work because sitting inside of a glass box in an office building in a conference room does not get you away from the minutia of what's going to happen when you walk out back to your desk. You can't. You have to know that you've got 2 or 3 days to just relax, and we have activities that keep them engaged. And at some point, at the end of the day, when they're really bushed, I send them back to their rooms because we can put up. We have the ability to put up 10 or 15 people here, and who can live here. And I send them off. I say, okay, we'll talk more about this after you're rested and after you get some food. Or we have a place where you can go shoot skeet. And they go out and blast away with shotguns. This is a Houston thing, mostly. So get away from it and let your mind go find other paths. You cannot grunt your way to creativity. I've got a picture of Rodin. I got the big poster of Rodin's Thinker up on the wall, and it says you cannot grunt your way to creativity. You have to be stimulated to creativity. And so when we run out of steam, we'll change the paradigm around. And we have big posters on the wall that we put up that are not in the area they're working at. If you're working on pumps, you may have pictures of centrifugal pumps. You may have a picture of a giraffe. You may have, because a giraffe's heart is a pump. You may have a picture of an octopus because that is a jet pump. And so you look for other areas that are similar, that are not in line with what they're used to stimulate their brain to think other things. That makes sense?
Absolutely. How often would you say that serendipity makes the final decision on something, where you put all this time and all this work and all this effort and all these sessions and all this brain power and all these alternative ways of looking at the problem and all these diagrams and everything, and it just comes to them all in a moment? How often does that happen there?
Every time. Because what we're doing is we're enhancing the probability of serendipitous in the brain. It's the whole thing. I got a diagram where I show here's the solution space that what you're trying to come up with fits into. A lot of complexity to that, okay? And here's your knowledge, little teeny dot over here. Here's when you bring 2 or 3 people together, that this Venn diagram gets bigger. When you have an expert or 2 that knows stuff that you do, or you bring somebody else in that's not in your industry, but knows it in a similar stuff, that solution space that you can bring to bear gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, it's never going to get all of the possible solutions in the universe, but you get bigger and bigger, and you're increasing the probability that one of them is going to go, oh, damn, I didn't know they could do that. And they go, well, why don't we could try that, or we could do this. Every time, that's where almost all of the great, really good solution comes from accidental combinations in that solution space that they were not aware of.
Whenever you are working with teams specifically, do you find that the decision-making framework for the path that you're going to take in the project requires a single executive decision, where there is a decision maker that makes the final call on how you're going to do something? Or are these democratic, decision-making teams a better way of going about it? What's your experience there?
At the end of the day, whatever you come up with is going to go up higher in the food chain, because it's going to depend on budgets. It's going to depend on a lot of other factors enter into it, but into the decision to go forward or not. But what we try to do is we try to, and by the way, you have now found the hardest part of the 100 concept sheets that we end up with, because the way we do it is we start off with, I wish we could do that. How can we do that? Or why can't we do that? And I wish this could happen. I wish I had anti-gravity. If I had that. And then we put those up, and then everybody goes around and votes on one, picks one or two or three or four or 10 over the course of 3 days. And they have to write it out in more of a fleshed out concept. And at the end of that, you've got to distill all that down and figure out, okay, what's near term or long term, what's going to cost more or not. The ones that are out on the left field, we were working on a session where we were trying to do underwater communication, and one of this brilliant woman electrical engineer said, you know what, neutrinos can be generated in an atomic pile, and they'll go through the planet and you can pick them up. It's like, you can't set an atomic pile down, and you can't, and the neutrino detectors are complicated. But it was like, it was a wacky, cool idea that got around everything. If you could only do it. Of course, it didn't make the cut, but it was like, great, we'll put that one aside and say that was a wacky idea, and we loved it. But then you have to go sort out what's feasible today, what may take some time, what will make immediate payoffs, and things like that. And we try. Now they get all the ideas, and they can go back and go through all this stuff, and they do. But you try to get 3 of them to go to the next step, prototyping, but not the way you think about it. People come to us and say, "Can you build a prototype of that?" And I said, "No, we're not a prototype house. We do prototypes in support of hypotheses, of theory testing. And the first way you test a theory is with the physics and the engineering of that, to be able to see whether or not that is, you're trying to violate any laws of physics, or you're that where you get in trouble. So you do that mathematical modeling of that stuff. And when you get that done, you go, okay, we think this one is good. Let's build what is the hardest part of that. And we build that hard part, physical prototype, to test it. Because if you solve the easy things first and come back to the hard one, you have wasted all that money if the hard one fails. So we go for the hard one, we build a prototype. Does it work? Yes. Okay, now let's put the rest of them in there. Now, does it work once? Yes. Now we have to make it, will it be reliable? And because you're testing for validity of the concept and the reliability of what you can make. And there's initial reliability, and then there's all sorts of ugly testing things that you got to do for a real product.
I want to take a step back and ask you the question that was posed to you on that panel that you were a part of with the ponytail and the Jerry Garcia look. Is creativity something that you are born with, or is it something that can be developed along the way?
I'm about 99% sure kids are born with natural creativity. We just knock it out of them. Draw between the lines. Behave yourself now. Sit down and be quiet and do this. Don't act out stuff.
Well, prophesy for us. I mean, how do you take 15 generations of kids who have been more and more encouraged to draw between the lines and revolutionize the fundamentals of the way that creativity is nurtured in young children?
If I could solve that, I would probably be rich now. But I will tell you that I'm actually trained. I have a master's in clinical psych. I was a school psychologist, and then I turned away from that finally and became an experimental psychologist first, then an architect. Okay. I can just remember going to Montessori schools and wondering how chaotic because Montessori schools let the kids they just teach themselves and they go off and explore and they do stuff. My sister taught for years in a Montessori school run by the city, the school district in Fort Worth. And it was astounding how well that worked. Smaller classes, second, third, and fourth graders, or third, fourth, and fifth graders together. They would teach each other. They were not like, you will read from this, you have to accomplish this, you have to do that, find your own way to do it, draw here, this is art, do whatever you want. But it was controlled chaos. And it takes a special person to be a Montessori teacher in that. But it paid off. She has so many kids. And by the way, these are mostly minority kids she was teaching. And she has so many of them who have come back to her and said, Mrs. Rainone, I remember you. It was wonderful. I am because of those experiences in that school.
So it sounds like if you could nurture a couple of generations of Montessori teachers and enable them access to a curriculum and children to teach it, that you might be able to solve that problem pretty quick.
I think it would go a long way to help. By the way, part of that is class size. Although they were a little smaller, they still had they had help, and the bigger kids helped the smaller kids. It's like kind of having a teacher's aide in there. How do you do that? Keep control. And I just, the systems have to be willing to let that happen.
I'm not only am I a proponent of the fact that we're born with creativity, but I am also of the opinion that everybody is good at math, that everybody is good at coming up with solutions, right? Solution orientation as a natural part of human psychology. And I also believe that people are good test takers. But I think the problem that a lot of people get into is the beliefs that they rehearse to themselves. I hear so many people say, I'm just not good at math, or no, I'm just not a good test taker. And I have to remind them that no, you saying that is the problem, right? Your brain can hear you, and it's creating a subconscious pattern for yourself that makes you a bad test taker.
Remember what I said about telling the bosses to not punish stuff. You're doing that to yourself when you're doing it. And when you do that, you actually are changing the way the non-conscious part of your brains are working. By doing that, you suppress that to yourself. Of course, you're right. Of course, it's the scripts that we read to ourselves that inhibit us.
What's one of the scripts that you read to yourself? What is a belief or a mantra, something that you found along the way where you find yourself repeating it to yourself whenever you're having issues or whenever you're stumped on a problem? Is there anything that's like that for you?
All problems yield to persistence.
All problems yield to persistence.
Yeah, that's what I say.
All problems yield to persistence.
Yeah, constant. That is in my mind all the time. Yep. I mean, because if you think about the history of innovation, I mean, when somebody said to Edison about his batteries, like, oh, you failed 1,300 times. I said, I just succeeded. I didn't fail. I found other ways that it didn't work. And then eventually he did. Same thing with the light bulb. It persists. You have to be persistent. And in the face of people who are saying you're spending too much money, or you're doing this, or you're running out of this, or that, so all things yield persistence.
Mike, where can everyone find you?
At PCDworks.com. PCD, Papa Charlie Delta, WORKS.com.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, you're certainly welcome.
This has been the Pulse Ox Podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.